I'm Billy S, welcome back to the channel. Today my community is ranking the top 10 hardest Elden Ring base game bosses. If you missed part 1 or part 2 where we covered bosses 50 through 31 and 30 through 11 respectively, check the description for links. Otherwise, let's jump right in. My community's top 10 hardest Elden Ring base game bosses, ranked by difficulty. Let me know your thoughts down below. At number 10, we have Star Scourge Radahn, who scored a total average of 6.78 out of 10. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. As one Radahn falls, another rises. And with the promised consort being the new hot commodity, Star Scourge's difficulty falls even further into obscurity. From the get-go, there are two ways to fight Radahn, either using the ability to summon NPCs at the Radahn Festival, allowing for you to manage an army as you take down this supernatural shard bearer. This is how I did it my first playthrough, and it's a really fun story moment for your journey, as well as for the questlines of Blythe and Alexander. Here, you don't really have to learn the moveset as much, as the aggro will often be taken by your allies. But if you're fighting alone, Radahn ends up being a well-designed challenge that actively rewards players for taking the time to learn each combo he has to offer. Staying close is actually better, as many of Radahn's attacks will simply fly over you as you attack his poor horse. It's only when the gravity magic and his enraged state come out that you're having to be careful with how you play. I still don't quite know how to consistently avoid his meteor strike, but I think hopping on Torrent and just running is the simplest bet. Then there's that rock sling attack in phase 2 that I found surprisingly tough to avoid, as it took most of my HP when it connected. Not looking forward to that one on a level 1 run. Radahn's anger goes through the roof here, and it becomes more agile, more dangerous, and yet still nerfed compared to his fight at launch. And it's those nerfs that likely have this Radahn down in 10th place, as opposed to his old haunting ground in the top 5. But maybe my voters can enlighten me further. Oh. Wow, okay. Radahn got a few mentions, but only in the context of other bosses. We only have one very succinct, very quick voter comment. Even if he's not the best or hardest boss in the game, it's impossible to not feel like the god of Elden Ring after beating General Radahn. And with 11 votes for favourite boss in our little 192 vote survey, that's a solid 7th place on that scale. Not bad. Not bad at all. At number 9, we have the Crucible Knight duo, who scored a total average of 7.07 out of 10. The first boss to push into the 7s, the Crucible Knight duo are the heels of the Lands Between. They relish in being hated by the community, yet are still able to kick people's asses into next week. And whether you think they're a well-designed fight or utter trash, nobody can deny that 2 Crucible Knights in one room equals a tough time. I like that they both use different weapons, meaning no overlapping moves of the same type. The Siluria Spear wielder tends to be the easiest target, with more telegraphed moves that leave them up close with the player, while the Sword and Shield variant has to plod on over to do more damage. It's all about separating the pair and taking them out one at a time, and once that clicked in my head, I managed this fight with aplomb. Because once you kill the Spear Knight, Ordovis is standing there like, ah shit, and you're thinking, I've killed 5 Crucible Knights with your moveset before. The fight is basically over once one of them goes down, but if you get unlucky, you can have a vicious cycle where neither enemy gives you an inch to breathe, leading to some deaths that feel very cheap as opposed to fair. While I do have a fondness for this fight, I recognize how hot of a take that is, and I'm fully okay living with my land of delusion. I'm not going to force anyone to join me there, because let's be real, the voter comments aren't going to be happy about this one. The most miserable time playing Elden Ring for me was the Crucible Knight duo. I spent over 1.5 hours on them, desperately trying to take them down with my greatsword, though it felt like days. Since I was a full dodge build and no summons, I had to go back and forth across the arena, just chipping away one hit at a time at the closest Crucible Knight. The fact that Ordovis was ranged didn't help, as I kept trying to go for him, but his partner always interfered. The whole fight felt like a chore, as this boss wasn't interesting, but just 2 field enemies in a room. Crucible Knights were the bane of my existence, and I was so relieved to be done with the boss. Yeah, understandable. I only attempted this boss on my second playthrough of the game when I had a character with actual good stats and I was aware of the challenge I was about to put myself through. At least they end up being optional so you're not forced to fight them. It's not my experience, as I really enjoyed going up against them once I could see the pattern, but it's also not a fight for everyone. I'd rather fight 10 Soldier of Godric's at once than 2 Crucible Knights. Just wanted to highlight this voter because they want to fight 10 Soldiers of God instead of 2 Crucible Knights. I've never seen someone want to put themselves through the trauma of fighting 10 of the hardest boss in the entire game. But you do you. At number 8, we have Godfrey, First Elden Lord, who scored a total average of 7.39 out of 10. Here he is, the big man himself, the fan favorite boss of the base game who can bench press a mountain, and yet I'm shocked to see him only land at number 8. Though I think it's a testament to how anytime I hear commenters or YouTubers talk about Godfrey, it's always to mention how incredibly fair his boss fight is, how his attacks are well telegraphed and always have ways to handle them, how he's the perfect level of challenge to create an iconic fight. It's not really been my experience, as I find his Horaloo form to be an absolute nightmare when it comes to dodge timings, and overall silly jankiness with the animations, but I respect everyone else's thoughts all the same, and I'm sure if I ever do a challenge run of Elden Ring, I might gain some newfound knowledge. I think his Phase 1 is a perfect level of difficulty. He expands on his Golden Shade form with similar attacks that have larger AoEs, the floor pulls are larger, the attack combos are longer, his aggression is amped up. You really do feel like you're fighting an Elden Lord, and once again you think, damn Morgott, you really could have done better with that Golden Shade. But then Horaloo hits you, and you have an entirely different moveset to tackle that can very easily throw off your entire rhythm. I find the swap between phases to be incredibly difficult to adapt to, and it's led to me finding Horaloo to be this enigma in my playthroughs. I always want to get through him as quickly as possible because I know the longer I fight him, the more fatigued I get. Of course, this is your ranking, viewers, so let's see why my voters found Godfrey to be a top 10 hardest boss. Godfrey is easily my favourite boss in the game. His first phase is a really good evolution of his Golden Shade fight, which I feel is already a really solid boss fight. This is then elevated by Horaloo, who is far more aggressive, but in a way that doesn't feel unfair. Almost all of his attacks are really intuitive to dodge when you put some effort into thinking about it. The only part I have to knock some points off of is his arena-wide stomp. While it admittedly isn't too difficult to dodge, it can be a little frustrating when he decides to spam it over and over again. Yeah, that's what I expected. Godfrey has some intuitive dodge timings, a great evolution on his previous fight, and the only sticking point is how many AoEs this man can bench press on a given attempt. Godfrey Horaloo was my favourite boss in the game of Elden Ring. Elden Ring was my first Souls game, and I feel that this boss was the one that most perfectly struck a balance between challenging and easily learnable. This whole fight has such a wonderful rhythm to it that is only made even better in the second phase with the very flashy grabs and combos. It was such a refreshing experience after I had such a painful struggle with the Godskin duo and Malekith. Rhythm is a very good way to describe this fight. Even I, someone who isn't a die-hard Godfrey stan, can agree that the way he flows between phases is done really well, complemented by the music as well, which gets far more frantic in the Horaloo phase, making it more likely for people to mess up certain dodges as they get used to this new type of dance. Overall, it's a fairly designed boss that doesn't overextend the difficulty, and feels refreshing after following bosses that have gimmicks that are less user-friendly like Malekith or the Godskin duo. At number 7, we have Dragon Lord Placidusax, who scored a total average of 7.45 out of 10. The optional encounter of Crumbling Farum Azula, this Dragon Lord, bound outside the reaches of space and time, awaits the return of his lord, and yet we rock in and think, yeah, this is something I should fight. I've always said that Placidusax is a boss I love because of its clear escalation as the fight goes on. There are no cutscenes to outline when phase transitions happen, with it all being shown through the animations of the boss and the dynamic music and arena that plays as the battle continues. The first third is the easiest of course, with Blizzardasax remaining fairly stationary. You just need to learn how his fire breath works and don't stay in the lightning AoEs, especially if he uses the giant lightning bolt explosion to blow off your eardrums. If this were the fight, Blizzardasax would be pretty low on the list, not even top 10. But the moment he takes off into the sky, attempting to dive bomb you, followed by a series of teleports and claw swipes, I knew this was a special fight. The challenge comes from his gargantuan health pool at 26,651 HP. This means he can tank a vast majority of hits, and you'll have to chip away at his weathered stony scales if you want to survive. So even though no attack is that devastating, the battle goes on for a while, and should you fail to conserve your energy and resources, you'll find yourself drawing dead early on. Combined with his phase-free lasers that take Darky to Medeir's ultimate attack, instead giving you 2 of them to avoid, which will likely either instantly kill you or knock you down to the lowest HP possible, and you've got a fight that caps off with insane spectacle. That last attack can also be a source of frustration if you get one-shot, but there are ways around that, like saving the Opaline Bubble Tier Physic for this attack, etc. So, do my voters like Placid Addy? So I'm drawing on my Rune Level 1 no-hit experience now, since I am doing the DLC on that and just cleared the base game. Blizzardasax and Dragon bosses in general, they absolutely suck to no-hit. Large hitboxes, multiple often lingering hitboxes, you can imagine the hell. If Placy's claw did not hit me, the lightning did. If the lightning misses, the fire hits me. If the fire I dodge, then he dive bombs me. If all else fails, the mighty almighty laser consumes me. I appreciate you starting with the explanation that you're drawing from Rune Level 1 runs, because that's obviously a very different criteria to the rest of the game, and from that perspective, I fully get your take. I'm personally a very messy player. I trade blows, I take chip damage like no tomorrow, and the idea of being unable to even do that is terrifying to me. The fact you went through it and came out of the other side is admirable, so well done to you. Blizzardasax is one of my favorite bosses, arguably the coolest cutscene or transition to a boss fight / arena ever. Not only that, it's super memorable for me as on my first playthrough, a buddy of mine told me of a secret boss fight, and helped me find him, and fight him. Let's just say, Blizzardasax kicked my butt a lot. Remember to level Vigor, one thing my buddy did but I did not do. Lots of runbacks, lots of laughs, some of my favorite gaming moments, getting one shot by lasers while my friend tanked everything, super cool fight. I eventually defeated him by myself once I was a bit more healthy. These are the stories I love to hear, just a memorable experience that relates back to the boss difficulty while sharing some fun moments you had with a friend. Blizzardasax earning his top spot for difficulty here while also providing some true gaming experiences. Our next entry on this list could never. As at number 6, we have the Valiant Gargoyles, who scored a total average of 7.5 out of 10. I actually think it's fitting that one of my least favorite bosses in Elden Ring doesn't even get the accolade of being in the top 5 hardest base game bosses. 6th place? Yeah, that's about right for these poison-spewing monsters. Gank fights in Elden Ring are hit or miss, and for me, the Valiant Gargoyles missed by trying to be something they weren't. They wanted to bring back the magic of the Dark Souls gargoyle fight, while taking the poison mechanic from the Demon Prince Phase 1 from Dark Souls 3, and it just didn't work. The main problem is the poison breath, which is incredibly muted in color compared to past games, making it very hard to see where the poison actually is. It also spreads insanely quickly, far faster than prior games, and will stunlock the player with damage while they're standing in the spray. It's just a subtle way of hitting the player with poison that goes against everything that made the Dark Souls 3 demon fights so good. Then combine that with a second gargoyle who is fairly aggressive and can also spew poison, and you just don't have a particularly engaging or fun fight. I know some people out there, voters included, won't understand why this boss gets so much hate, but as someone who played the whole series back to back to back for footage, I got to experience the comparisons firsthand, and the Valiant Gargoyles are just bad, straight up. You might be able to have fun with them, but they really fall apart from a game design standpoint. Blackblade Kindreds have the same moveset without the poison, and are infinitely better. Now then, let's give our voters the mic. Man, screw the Valiant Gargoyles right to hell. I cannot commit to text my unbridled hatred of this boss in enough detail. When people say they hate gank fights in FromSoft games, this is the frickin' boss that I think of. First of all, on an individual basis, the gargoyles are actually a really fun enemy to fight, and I wish there were more boss encounters with them that weren't the Blackblade Kindreds. They'd make a really fun and challenging early game boss. However, as a gank, their movesets, despite wielding different weapons, do not complement each other at all. You can tell they were going for a kind of Demon Prince throwback boss, but completely forgot all the things that make that boss good. The poison is practically invisible, they're both aggro at the same time, all the time, they both have garbage to avoid AoEs, and they're both too big for them both to be seen on screen, so you get hit with a vacuum slice all the time from off-screen. Thanks for reading my rant, and keep up the good work, Billy. I love your videos, and I'm in my last year of secondary school, so I need all the comfort I can get. Hello from Ireland. First of all, good luck to you in your education. I know those last years can be insanely stressful, but you have got this. If you can beat the Valiant Gargoyles, you can pass an exam. Secondly, you brought up how the Demon Princes take turns with their aggro, which is so true. The Valiant Gargoyles might have this implemented, but it doesn't really feel like it works. It often feels like dodging a car crash as I tried to take down one gargoyle while praying the other one doesn't keep up his combo. As alluded to earlier, another voter is a little bit more confused by this whole discussion though. Valiant Gargoyles often get listed as the worst bosses, and I just don't get it. They're by no means memorable since they are just a copy boss, but I never struggled with them, and I know it's not because I'm good at the game, because I'm not. Just bonk on head and roll out of the way of the poison. The issue is that most players struggle to actually see the poison coming. Let's go back to the Demon Prince's fight in Dark Souls 3 again. The poison worked a little differently there. The floor would change color in a line, then after a few seconds, the actual attack would come. Like an AoE in an MMO raid, you get a warning, then you get the attack. With the Valiant Gargoyles, they skip the warning and only give the attack, which comes out so fast that you don't always have time to process the poison because it doesn't stand out within the arena. It's not that sharp purple like Dark Souls 3, it's this muted green that doesn't reflect well with the blue water. But hey, I love that you had an easy time. I wish we could all feel that way. There's a lot of hard bosses in Elden Ring, but I think Soldier of Godric and the Valiant Gargoyles are the best choices for this. They both last so long round after round with their long, hard health bars. Even after I feel like I'm finished, they want to go again. With the Gargoyles, I'm usually a fan of duos, but they came on a bit strong, though when it was over, I'm glad I did it. While Soldier of Godric may look average, he's anything but. The way he winds up his blade before driving it in is breathtaking. Overall, I have to say both bosses are pretty tough. Won't lie, I didn't realize the innuendos in that comment until I was halfway through reading it. Masterfully played, my good sir. At number 5, we have Mohg, Lord of Blood, who scored a total average of 7.95 out of 10. And not only is he our 5th hardest boss as voted for by you, but he's also the voters' favourite boss in the base game with 39 votes, beating out Godfrey with 25, Malenia with 22, Morgott with 21, and Malekith with 20. Mohg is another boss similar to Godfrey, where the overall sentiments of the community are that he's an incredibly fair fight that rewards careful positioning and doesn't have a ton of bullshit beyond nihil. While I can't say my partner or I have managed to get his second phase moveset down, he is still one of my favourite fights in Elden Ring, and his difficulty deserves to be recognised. After I beat the DLC my first time, I went back in New Game Plus so I could try a few bosses again, only to find myself actually struggling to refight Mohg. He's got a lot of damage output, enhanced by his various blood attacks that inflict bleed buildup, so if you're not careful, you'll end up needing to heal more often than you'd like. And of course, without the purifying crystal tier you get from Eleonora, you're gonna be in for a brutal enraged state, which I would say is a small knock against this fight. His phase 2 is also so hard to position for, with the way his wings give him so much movement, that I can't keep up. I'll lose my cool more often than not, resulting in my death. I back up into corners of the arena, and that's just not ideal in any situation. I find Mohg to be an inherently difficult boss, dare I say, tougher than many of the DLC fights added last year. Now, I know a lot of you love Mohg, and I did read all the comments about him, but there was one voter who went above and beyond with one of the longest comments on the forum. It was so detailed, I have to feature it, so this segment is dedicated to you, dear voter. Mohg is a phenomenal boss. I fought him significantly too early before I even fought Morgott, and I struggled. His damage was immense, he had some delayed attacks that would mess you up if you timed it slightly wrong, and his nihil kept killing me. I had to step back, take a breath, and reconsider my life choices. I had to go on a whole side quest just to make him doable, which sounds bad, but I actually love it. Rewarding exploration by providing powerful items that make boss fights more doable is something that should happen more often, in my opinion. Anyways, once I had the tier, I was really able to focus on learning his moves. The first phase is extremely fair, it's deliberate, with almost every move having a large wind-up that allows you to anticipate the blow. He has some blood mix-ups that make spacing really important, and you need to know when to close in and when to back off. After all, his AoE move is a shower, and a true gamer never showers. Now, after he transitions into his second phase, not much changes. He has almost the same moveset with many of the same timings. The difference is, he's on crack now, and oh shit, he can fly! His second phase is like if you took the first phase and pressed the ×2 button on the moveset. He's significantly faster, way more aggressive, he's added flying attacks to his moves now, and he has some more difficult variations on older moves. It's an amazing second phase. The first phase is like the training wheels. You'll never get through the second phase if you can't do the first one with confidence. The second phase adds just enough moves and variations to feel fresh and dangerous, while keeping enough of the first phase to feel like the same boss. The thing that makes Mohg such a good fight is that he's fair. Besides nihil, every single one of his moves is well telegraphed and fairly simple to dodge once you get the hang of things. The blood flame on the ground also adds an added stress of positioning that I much appreciate. In the end, Mohg is one of the hardest fights in Elden Ring IMO, taking me around 70 tries, but he's also one of the most fun. Wow, what else can I say? You did my job for me, thank you so much! An insanely well thought out write-up of a boss that I couldn't have managed. For example, it never really clicked with me how similar his phase 1 and 2 movesets are because I'm always just so distracted by the wings and the way he zooms around the room. So thank you for being a great comment and for bringing a lot of nuance to your thoughts. That shower line was legitimate fire. At number 4, we have the Godskin duo, who scored a total average of 7.97 out of 10. Ornstein and Smo, you are not the poster children for being a bad gank fight. The Godskin duo is just such an odd experience. While the idea of facing both Godskin enemies isn't inherently bad, the fact that their movesets were not calibrated to have actual synergy is insane to me. They both are fast, their attacks are relentless, and if you don't kill one of them as quickly as possible, you will be overwhelmed. It's the only fight I can think of outside of the Living Failures where the bosses share a communal health bar, except here it makes no sense. Why do the Godskin duo respawn? Why do they arbitrarily die when you deplete the health bar? Why not just do what every other gank fight in the series does and have 2 singular health bars? We didn't even need a boss here. Malekith and Placidusax are literally right there at the end of Crumbling Farum Azula. If you have sleeping pots, you'll likely have an easier time due to both bosses being inherently weak to the sleep status, and I don't think it's a hard strategy to pull off if you're struggling, which I'd guess is why the difficulty ranking is still in the 7s and not higher, because if this were a 2022 ranking, I could see this pair in the 8s or 9s. The fact that the strategy is to try and make the fighter 1v1 for as long as possible shows its utter failing as a gank fight, and they don't follow the formula of the one aggressor and one observer that the good ganks use. It's just really disappointing. But one voter has a foolproof trick to make it all feel a little bit better. The duo pretty much fails in everything it's trying to be. I'm not going to pretend like that isn't the case. It's unbalanced, has 0 build-up, input reads, and, in short, is pretty poorly designed. But it does do one thing right. It's fun. Don't believe me? Okay then, follow this simple 3-step plan. 1. Slap some status effects on your weapon, pick your poison, literally if you want, even though I don't recommend that one. 2. Summon. The boss isn't playing fair, so don't try playing fair right back. Get Banal in there. Call upon the might of your rats. Seriously guys, there are other ashes in this game that aren't called mynameispunch, and some of them, shockingly, are really fun to use. 3. Bonk away. Gank the gankers, slap the shit out of them, curry in retaliation their fireballs away, or just straight up parry them. Do something, I don't know. I'm not trying to tell you how to play the game, I'm just suggesting that if you don't like a fight, you shouldn't have to put up with its bullshit for the sake of saying that you completed the game cheeseless. The fight got significantly better for me when I stopped trying to treat them like a fair opponent and started treating them like a health bar. This is a truly underrated lesson. Sometimes it is okay to just say fuck it and use summons, use status effects, sleep pots. But ironically, I actually did all of this on my first playthrough when the game launched in 2022, and I was still miserable. The imbalance always felt so strong that I never felt like I had a sense of security with this fight. It wasn't until my recorded run, where I had a weapon that could tear through them quickly, where I ended up finding it a bit less annoying, so it really depends on the person. I fully agree though, if something is irritating you, you don't have to deal with it. Life is too short to ruin your experience with a game by trying to look cool with a summonless run. Godskin Duo just feels stupidly hard. They do not feel like they complement each other. The Apostle is thin and fast, the Noble is fat and faster, I think. Their AoEs in their second phase is manageable on their own, but very hard to concentrate on while fighting another guy. The pillars are pretty much useless, but what really makes this stupid hard is how many times they have to regenerate before the game decides you're done. If they made it so you had to kill both quick before one revived, that would have been kinda cool. It could have required you to be more strategic with how you deal your blows, making it a more strategical fight. But to fight them over and over until the health bar says stop just makes this a tedious endurance with two guys that aren't balanced together nearly as well as gank squads that came before them. I feel like you're meant to summon here, that's why there is always one right outside the arena, but it still doesn't feel quite balanced even then. Why couldn't they have just revamped this fight in the recent patch to work closer to the way I described here? It at least would make this fight more interesting and less of a poorly thought up endurance test. Yeah, while the Valiant Gargoyles are still my least favourite gank in the game, I just can't deny that Godskin Duo are the most broken gank in the game from a developer perspective. I just don't know what they were going for here. It doesn't feel like anyone knows what they were going for here. I actually love this voter's idea of a Throne Watcher, Throne Defender style fight. Perhaps this was just an experiment and the result so that people don't like this type of boss design, at least not without justification. And making it a gank is just an extra layer of bleh. At number 3, we have Radagon of the Golden Order and the Elden Beast, who scored a total average of 8.04 out of 10. Alright, for the first time, I have decided to listen to the comments and include Radagon and Elden Beast as a singular entry. I usually avoided this in past episodes in this series, like with Emma and Ishin in Sekiro, but in my opinion that was an optional fight for an optional ending, whereas in Elden Ring, everyone has to experience the Radagon Elden Beast combo to beat the game. And I'd certainly say they're a hard fight, though nowadays it's more so Radagon than the Elden Beast. This is because the Elden Beast has been heavily nerfed over the years, from decreasing the damage and intensity of the Elden Stars attack, to more recently finally allowing the player to summon Torrent for the Elden Beast phase, making it easier to catch up to the boss when it swims away, while making certain attacks more engaging as a result. It's a great change that skews the difficulty into fair territory, which allows Radagon more of a chance to shine as the real meat of the difficulty here. I find Radagon so hard to read. The man slides along the arena like a magnet looking for a target, or Georges at the end of her All-Stars 9 talent show. That hammer carries him as he whirls towards you and breaks your nose. It's truly a sight that never gets old. His various holy magic AoEs he creates upon the ground are numerous and hard to avoid if you don't know they're coming. Sometimes he'll just raise a hand and slice you with light beams, and sometimes he'll catch you in a rather painful grab that can still damage you if you dodge it due to the shockwave that follows its impact. He can teleport around the arena and can even deflect certain attacks if he enters a parry stance. He hits hard, has a lengthy HP pool, and ultimately earns the title as one of the toughest final bosses in the FromSoft catalogue. And yet he's learnable. You might get clipped a couple times by some stray attacks, but he can be guard countered, he can be staggered. And fuck, after Consort in the DLC, I'm sure Radagon is like a piece of cake nowadays. And with Elden Beast bolstering the difficulty by providing a slightly easier, yet still lengthy extra fight to the mix, it makes sense why this duo is in the top 3. Voters, what about you? Are we gonna get any Elden Beast love? I feel really bad for Radagon from a gameplay perspective. Here you have a pretty awesome final fight against the current Elden Lord. It's set inside the Erd Tree, he rises from Marika's remains, hammer in hand, then the music kicks in and it's so cool. And the fight itself, while not perfect, is really fun, with him being pretty aggressive and capable of inflicting devastating damage, but not able to tank it well as a trade-off. Overall, a pretty satisfying conclusion. Only for this to be completely ruined by the fucking abomination that is the godforsaken, pun intended, Elden Beast. Who looked at Aldrich from Dark Souls 3 and said, yeah, make that but in a much bigger arena, give him significantly more health, have him run away every 2 seconds, and spam multiple annoying to evade attacks simultaneously. Oh, and every time you die to that, you get to fight the previous boss again, making players get absolutely tired of the first fight in the process. That sounds good, right? Yeah, you can ride Torrent now, only problem is that he can't jump over the Elden Beast's sword projectiles for some reason, meaning you can't reliably use him to close distance quickly. Elden Beast's attacks that leave behind projectiles that follow you for what feels like 30 minutes make me long for Aldrich's arrow spam, and what makes all of this worse is that this is the final fight of the game. And as I already mentioned, this really drags Radagon down for me, as fighting him over and over again because I died to Elden Beast's nonsense made me really aware of attacks of his I don't enjoy, his teleport for instance. The Elden Beast not only ruined the finale's momentum for me by being so bad, it also kind of ruined an otherwise solid fight for me due to the constant repetition. I think this will be the more prevailing opinion on this fight. Radagon being the part you always face first will be more fresh in your mind, but also runs the risk of being fought to the point of tedium, while Elden Beast can be a frustrating little fish who can cooperate to give you a really smooth run, or do everything in its power to do the opposite. I personally wouldn't try to dodge Elden Beast's sword swings with Torrent myself, but only because I know the dodge timing's on foot and that's what I'm comfortable with, but I have to imagine outside of that Torrent does have some use. Either way, I fully understand why Elden Beast doesn't click, and I also agree that I wish it was more of a Bloodborne deal, where once you beat Radagon, you can just fight Elden Beast on his own, similar to the Moon Presence. I do think FromSoft has learned from this though. The only real difficulty I find with Radagon/Elden Beast is the two of them being together. Godfrey/Horaloo did the same gimmick, but it was executed better, as not only are both forms more fun than Radbeast, but are also more difficult IMO. Radbeast is just two okay bosses that aren't hard, individually stapled together. I actually wanted to highlight this voter comment because I disagree with the gimmick assessment. Godfrey and Horaloo are two different forms, yes, but they share the same health bar. Radagon and Elden Beast not sharing the same health bar leaves them more in line with my comparison from earlier, Emma the Gentle Blade and Ishin Ashina Shura from Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. I do agree the Godfrey fight is better and more well executed, but it's like comparing an apple to an orange. No Elden Beast defenders in the voting comments though. Big sad. At number 2, we have Malekith the Black Blade, who scored a total average of 8.25 out of 10. And I realise with this ranking that I am very out of touch with this community's difficulty ranking, because I don't think I'd have Malekith as my second hardest boss from the base game. Though I can see why the average player would end up at this spot. The first phase with the Beast Clergyman is a barrage of projectiles and beast incantations that can drive players up the wall. You need to find specific moves you can react to and get hits in, while dodging the copious beast claws and rocks thrown your way. I found the pillars quite useful here in giving you a brief chance to breathe before you dive back in, as once you find a rhythm with the Beast Clergyman, you will be able to consistently make it to Malekith. As for our Phase 2, the Hound of Marika may not have the highest HP pool, but he takes his role as a glass cannon very seriously. He will fuck you up, and if he doesn't get you, the Destined Death sub-effect will. Losing your maximum HP for a short amount of time as your life slowly gets siphoned away is terrifying, made even more tense by how much Maliketh moves around the arena. He bounces off of the walls, he double jumps in the air, he does the anime sword slam followed by various slashes attacks. He is extra, and that visual flair, combined with how hard it is to get him to stay still, can lead to a drawn out fight if you're not careful. Of course, you can use the Blasphemous Claw to parry the wolf and get a hit or two off, but even then the stun isn't very long and he can still hit you in his stun animation, as I have found out. You have to decide whether you think it's worth the trade-off. I found Maliketh insanely hard my first playthrough, but on a repeat run, he went down in a handful of attempts. I think your build matters here, and that's what I believe. What I'd love to see explained is why he's number 2 on this list though. Is there any voter who can shine a light on this topic? Unpopular choice, I know, but I really couldn't stand the Maliketh fight. It took me the most tries to best, yes, even more than Malenia, and it wasn't so much the difficulty per se, as it was that I never got a clear feel for either phase's moveset. People always say that the Beast Clergyman is much easier, but even he seemed to be pepped up on something, frenetically bouncing around with little downtime. And then Maliketh amps this up by 50%. What really frustrated me about him was how much time he spends off the ground, bouncing between those damned pillars. Sorry, Billy, I know how much you love those transcendent pieces of architecture, but in this fight, I feel like he acts like a ruddy pinball bouncing between them. Spending so much time off the ground, out of reach, and peppering me full of holes with those sword swings, that I feel simultaneously bored by how little I can do to him, but also frustrated that I can't get a word in edgeways. Yes, I know I could go for more magic attacks and dichotomize my build, and this is a skill issue on my part, but as someone who loves a classic dex build in these games, I just found this fundamentally unfun. Firstly, don't worry, the pillars forgive all. They too recognize that sometimes they aren't everyone's cup of tea and they don't always work. Your time with Maliketh reminds me of my first playthrough. I was convinced the Beast Clergyman was harder than Maliketh. I struggled with both phases to even figure out what was what, and I knew I was just sucking at the game. For me, I always get better at these games on a second or third playthrough, which was the case with Maliketh and I. Something clicked the second time around. Though I suspect with you that might not be the case, and that's totally okay. A lot of these bosses are lower than they would normally be for me, and that's due to the unbeatable power of autism. I can't help it if I special interest my way into being good at video games. Maliketh evades the power of autism though, by hitting me more than I hit him. The Destined Death is a fun mechanic, if a little bit overtuned, and his hitbox is a bit weird, leading to some attacks missing when they really shouldn't. But overall, pretty good fight. I just wanted to shout out the power of autism. I respect it, I relate to it, I'm autistic as well, so I just find it funny that Maliketh is somehow our kryptonite. But you bring up Destined Death being overtuned, and I wouldn't be shocked if that status is a large part of this fight's difficulty for people. Losing health at the worst moments and being unable to get it back for a short time, being forced to dodge the boss without making a mistake is extremely tough. Maliketh the Black Blade is my favourite boss for a few reasons. The first is that you instantly get put on the back foot, as Maliketh is extremely aggressive. Having to both learn and work for your openings feels super rewarding. The second reason is that his design is metal as fuck. He's also pulling out an entire Virgil Judgment cut every other combo, making it feel even more rewarding dodging his attacks. I just wish that he had more than 9,000 HP, as his second phase dies way too quickly. This is my first time voting in one of these rankings, and I'm very glad to be a part of the community. Thanks. Hopefully you'll be a part of more rankings in the future. Overall, what your comment and the comments I've read before tell me is that Maliketh is just an extremely aggressive boss, and if your playstyle doesn't allow you to easily withstand such force, you are going to struggle immensely. And a lot of players don't really invest into their defenses all that much in these games, which might just solve my queries. He isn't the hardest boss in the game though. I don't think anybody's shocked, as we'll soon see. At number 1, we have Malenia Blade of Miquella, who scored a total average of 9.67 out of 10. The second highest total average in my community rankings outside of Promised Consort Radahn back when the DLC released. I mean, Everyone else was always playing for second place in this series. Malenia is just in another league when it comes to the design of her fight. Every attack has a lifesteal effect that forces you to dodge all of her moves, an effect that also procs if you try to shield from her attacks, which means shield builds have an aggressive damage output to keep up. She's got low poise, making her easy to stagger, so if you have specific strategies on hand, you can cheese her to varying degrees, yet she can still find a way to break out of those chains and take back all the health you took from her. Waterfowl Dance is Waterfowl Dance. She launches between attacks near immediately, which makes it very hard to find those perfect moments, so if you're not stagger searching, you're going to make no progress. And in Phase 2, she gains the ability to rot you with most of her attacks. I actually love the design of her new abilities like Scarlet Aeonia or the Scarlet Clone attack. I think she's incredibly rewarding to master, but every time I beat Malenia, I'm left feeling like I need 3 to 5 business days just to recover. Yet, I can't be mad, because I think she's insanely well designed, and a couple tiny tweaks would go a long way, yet because of that high skill ceiling, she will always have haters, and sometimes I fall in that category as well. So voters, what say you about the boss that has been talked about already to death? I like the Malenia fight, but I think there's too much that makes her hard. A powerful grab, hyper-armored kick, Scarlet Rot, that clone attack, 2 health bars, the list goes on. It feels like they dumped a load of stuff on her at the last moment to make it more challenging. Despite this though, I like fighting her and it feels amazing every time I beat her. Admittedly, I disagree with the sentiment that this was all dumped on her last minute. This is a very meticulously planned boss fight. Do I think everything she has is needed for her kit? No, but it definitely was planned. You did remind me of her god-awful grab though. It's a run ender when it lands because it does so much damage and it Scarlet Rots you. It's heartbreaking when it happens in Phase 2. I find bosses that push the boundary of challenging the player frequently get a lot of hate and flack early on, but as the fanbase gets more used to them, the boss grows on them and becomes ubiquitous in fandom. Malenia, Blade of Miquella, isn't my personal favourite boss, but she is the most fascinating to me in both her design and the shift in the fandom's view of her as more of the population got good. Genuinely kind of insane on FromSoft's part to include a boss that heals itself on hit, and I can't help but respect and admire it. You've hit the nail on the head right there. We saw it with the DLC this summer. People expect to go into these games with all their knowledge and steamroll, and they never do, myself included. Challenge is met with pushback as opposed to being welcome with open arms, and because a lot of gamers need to familiarize themselves with concepts first before being able to fully appreciate them, this, I believe, is especially the case with FromSoft bosses. That cycle you described has happened ad nauseum for years now, and yet Malenia is easily the most interesting case because they overtuned her to such a degree that she stands out on her roster more than any other boss in any other FromSoft game. Malenia, Blade of Miquella, aka Waterfowl Dance, is my personal most hated boss, not only in the entire From Software game catalogue, but entire gaming. While it is true that she becomes slightly fun once you learn how to deal with her BS attack, the process of learning is probably the least fun thing I did in video games. For me, attacks that the vast majority of players need to Google how to evade because there is zero visual feedback on how it's supposed to be dealt with is unacceptable game design. Additionally, an attack that requires derailing her tracking AI in close proximity to be dodgeable is peak artificial difficulty. I know about the ice pot trick, but there is zero indication that this singular item, among dozens of others, would interrupt her and is clearly unintended. Despite the praise I give to Malenia, I fully agree with this commenter here, in that her hardest attacks, be it Waterfowl Dance or the clones in Phase 2, do require either an insane time sink or a Google to figure out how to handle them. I learned to dodge the clones because I watched a video, I learned to survive Waterfowl because my partner and I experimented with shielding the first hit, and dodging the second and third, which was more intuitive. but Malenia feels like a fight that was designed with word of mouth in mind when it came to beating her. It brings up the idea that FromSoft multiplayer was built on, people going out of their way to help each other so that everyone can continue to improve. I'm not inherently against this, unlike our voter here, but I do think Malenia pushed this concept to its limit, to the point where Let Me Solo Her became a community icon for these very reasons. Food for thought. Malenia, dearest Malenia, what is there to say about her that hasn't been said yet? Well, here's something. I truly wholeheartedly believe that after Radahn's nerfs, she is the hardest boss in the game, DLC included. Sure, we've all learned to master her now, using shields or ice pots to counter waterfowl, or for the best of us, dodge it. But she demands so much from the player, from those insanely tough to dodge attacks, the heal on a hit, the status build up. I think Radahn can be more difficult because of the amount of stuff happening each time he attacks, but Malenia's mechanics are way harder, more punishing, and unfair. Still, the thrill of fighting her in the presentation of the boss makes her my favourite boss in Elden Ring. A very brave statement. I won't give my thoughts just yet, I'm actually saving that for another time, but let me know down below if you think Malenia or Consort is harder as of their in-game fights right now. What we do know though is that Malenia, Blade of Miquella, Goddess of Rot, is your hardest boss in Elden Ring's base game, a title she is never going to lose. And that's the list. Which Elden Ring boss is the hardest to you outside of Malenia? Let me know down below, and be sure to parry that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all my future videos. I want to give a quick shout out to my YouTube channel members for supporting me for another month. You guys are amazing. It's $4.99 a month. You get early access to future videos. You get a shout out in the description and at the end of videos as well. If you want to follow me, check out my Blue Sky. That's where I'm most active. And I'll see you guys next time for another video. Adios.